I instantly liked Peter when I first met him. He worked in a record store, and he would show me the really good records that were $1.50. New York Dolls' first album, Iggy and the Stooges' original pressing, the Vibrators, green 10-inch, whatever it was. The type of music that he liked and I liked were exactly like. And now, the first 4 months that Peter and I knew each other, I called him Richard, and he never once corrected me. And it took about after I found out that his actual name was Peter, it took about 4 months for me to convince him to be in a band with me. So we got on right away really well. When I first met Mike, I was like, there's no fucking way I'm going to be in a band with this guy. He was in bell-bottoms, he had really funny hair and these stupid glasses, and yet there was a spirit to him that I really kind of liked. We've always had somewhat of an adversarial, but really sweet adversarial relationship, and he's like my big brother now, in a way. Bill Berry, I admired his eyebrow. That was that. I just went, the guy's got a great eyebrow. He's probably a good drummer.
He was kind of an exotic character, Michael was. He had good musical taste. I used to hold records for him. It was a used store, so if we got something kind of cool and I thought he'd like, I'd hold it for him. And we became friends. I'd been writing songs and playing guitar for years and been in little crummy little bands, and Michael was a singer, and we just sat down and played a couple things, and he could really sing. He was like 19 or 18 or something. He could really sing, and we just started writing songs together immediately.
Bill Berry and I had been in a band in Macon, Georgia before we moved to Athens, and we were looking for a band, and Peter and Michael had met and become friends in Athens, and they were looking for a rhythm section, so we got hooked up through a mutual friend and played for her birthday party.
We didn't really think about what kind of music we wanted to make when we first started. We never intended to record records. We only did so eventually because there were clubs that wouldn't book us as a live band without a record. So we made our first single, and then we made the EP, and then we got a record contract, and it went on from there.
We would play some town, and we'd get 5 or 10 people, and the next time we'd come, we'd get 50, and the next time we came, we'd get 200. And it's obvious that something's working if you're doing that.
Well, what I was saying in the early days wasn't a real lot. I was kind of just moaning and howling along with the music, and I had this fascination with the voice as instrument, and not really. I had not yet formed the idea that if a song is going to go on a record, it needs to have some form to it. Our first 2 albums really are just me making onomatopoeic howling sounds, and our 3rd album is really where I decided that I couldn't really get away with that much longer, and I needed to take a stab at narrative, and that's what I did. It's become mythologically difficult, and we were just miserable at the time. We didn't have very much money. We picked up and moved to London to work with Joe Boyd because this is where he was based and wanted to work, and it was a very, very cold winter, and we were traveling an hour by tube to get to the studio every day, so it wasn't a great time for us. We were also really questioning how much we wanted to be famous, and because our first album came out, and we were voted the #1 record of the year over Michael Jackson's Thriller, which is the record that has sold more copies than any other record in the history of recorded music. That was our first album. I was 23 years old. That was kind of a lot to have foisted upon us at that point. So when it came time to record Fables, I wasn't really sure I wanted to do this. I wasn't sure that this was really the direction that I wanted to head in.
There was just a period where, quite literally, we worked probably 5 years in a row, and we had Christmas Day off, and it'd be one of those things where you'd rehearse until about the 23rd and have those days off, and then you'd rehearse for the New Year's Eve show, and then you had to make a record, and there was a period where it just felt like I was one step behind myself every second. I never had enough sleep. I never was ready for whatever I had to do, and it was kind of hard, but it wasn't, it wasn't like being a minor or something like that.
It's hard for me to say what made me carry on in 1985, but I think I would have to, generally I could say a love of music. Waking up and going, this is my fucking dream. This is what I wanted at age 15. Now, at that point, age 15, the idea of being a pop star or being in a band and traveling and it's utterly fantastic, of course. And I was a teenager when I decided that this is what I was going to do. And the reality of it is a very different thing. It's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of luck. And to be a part of that, from where I stand, whether it's in the recording studio or on stage, to be a part of that makes me the luckiest guy in the world. Warner Brothers had supported and stood by artists like Neil Young and Van Dyke Parks, and the people that were running that company at the time that we signed were people who had a pulse, loved music, and would, if they believed in a band or an artist, would support them to the end.
The main reason we switched from Iris to Warner's was Europe. We kept coming over here and working really hard and playing these places in the winter. It's tough touring Europe in the wintertime. And we kept doing that, and people kept telling us that they couldn't find our records in the stores. And not to bash IRS, they were perfect for us. They did, they did exactly what we needed them to do for us in America, which was to give us a chance to grow and become whatever it is we were going to become. But it just got a little tiresome to keep beating our heads on the wall over here. And we knew that Warner's was a great artist-oriented label, and that they would probably do a better job of getting us, exposed over here. It was a year long, and it was hugely fun, but it was the most exhausting thing I've ever done up until '95. And at the end of it, you don't realize how tired you are until you get home, and 2 weeks later you're still tired and you're not back to your normal self, and it's just so grueling. And it wasn't so much. I don't know. It was, aside from that, it was just a general feeling. It just didn't feel like going out on the road was the right thing to do. And I guess in retrospect, it turned out to be a good decision, because we didn't want to get to the point where we felt like touring was an obligation. Playing is something you're supposed to want to do, and indeed, it's what I live for. It's the best thing about this job. And if you got to the point where it just became this hated, sort of dreaded obligation, then we've gone too far at that point, and we didn't want to get that point. My feeling about it was, if he needs to do that for himself, then by all means go. I kind of knew it was coming. I just didn't know it was coming that soon. He had mentioned to me that he was thinking about at least not touring anymore, if not actually retiring, and I thought he'd stick it out a little bit longer. But when you have a life-threatening experience, I think it certainly makes you prioritize with a little more urgency, maybe than you did before. And that's what he needs to be happy. He's my dear friend, and that's what I want him to be.
He just didn't want to be in the band anymore. He'd had enough, and his timing was, in one way, very good, and in another way, really bad. He told us on the first day of recording the album Up that he didn't want to do it. He didn't want to go in the studio. He didn't want to tour ever again. He'd had it with being in a band. He wanted to retire and be a farmer. And I felt somewhat betrayed, but I also, I was shocked, but I was also, it really called into question, what am I doing if one of us, because it was always all for one and one for all, if one of us has decided that this is enough, what am I doing still doing this, or do I even still want to do this, or who are we without him? And it took us a good year and a half to figure that out. The making of that record, Up, was incredibly difficult. I think it's been documented a lot. The band, in my mind, broke up for the better part of a month at one point, where we hadn't spoken to each other in a long time. And then it came back together, and it came back together through an appreciation of each other and a love of music, which is where we started. So in a way, this is a little, cheesy sounding, but it was a little bit of a rebirth. It was like we were right back where we started in the very beginning. It was the one thing that we all wanted to do that kept us together. The tour that we did after releasing that record, which we weren't supposed to do, we announced no tour, and then that was what really galvanized it for us as a group. That's what took an idea and made it a reality. Going out on the road and playing in front of people and recognizing, wow, we do have an impact. People love not only the old songs, but the new songs. We are not past our prime. We're not repeating ourselves. We're not going through the motions. We're not stagnant. And what a great confirmation of what I hoped was the case.
We have not gotten this far by trying to set up, 5-year plans. Unfortunately, in this business, you have to set up 2-year plans, which is what we have right now. We've got to tour this summer, and then we're going to go back and finish the next record, and then we're probably going to tour on that. Beyond that, there's no point in even thinking about it. It'll be what it'll be.
I think one of the things that we always have we're not in common that causes trouble is that I always think 5 or 6 years ahead and have plans. And Mike and Michael think about as far as when their next meal is, and I appreciate the fact that they're two people who live in the present. I'm not. I feel like, okay, I want to write these songs. I want to do this. I want to go on tour then. I want to make this record. It's important for us to do this by then. By the time I'm 55, I want to have accomplished this. And of course, none of that ever happens. But it's nice to have a goal. I mean, if you don't have some kind of goal to go to, you don't go anywhere. So I tend to be the guy that will be saying, well, 6 months from now, and they both are tearing their hair out. And look at Michael. Look what happened. That's me. I'm a planner. I have plans for everything, and that way, I'm pretty prepared. Next record out May next year, ideally. Tour. We haven't been to Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Asia for quite a while. Do those. Summer in Europe again. Fall in America. Work on new material then. Take a little bit of time off. Start the next record in 2005. I could go on, and will it happen? Not exactly, but I think if I wrote down my predictions, they'd come closer to being real than maybe the other guys' predictions.
My grasp of the future is what am I going to have for dinner tonight and where am I going to eat it? We never really had goals as a band, and in a way I think that served us pretty well. Our only goal really was to make the best record that we could make when we decided to make records, and we're still trying to do that.